Alright, let's talk about money for a second. You know, that mysterious thing that always seems to vanish before the month is even halfway through? No matter how much of it we make, it somehow slips away. But lately, there's been a lot of buzz about a certain project in the digital money world, something that's been quietly growing in the background, and now, it's getting ready to step into the spotlight. It's called Pi Network. Pi has been around for a few years, quietly building a massive following. But now, it's got one big date circled on its calendar, November 22nd, 2025. That's the day many in the Pi community believe everything could change, the day Pi might finally take its place as a real, global digital currency. Some say it's just hype, others believe it could be the beginning of something revolutionary. Either way, the countdown is on. Now, to understand why this particular date has people talking, we need to unpack a few things, starting with Pi itself. Imagine being able to create or mine cryptocurrency, not with fancy computers that guzzle electricity, but just with your phone. That's the magic behind Pi. It started with a simple promise: make digital money accessible to everyone. No complicated setups, no tech barriers. Just your phone, a tap each day, and you're part of the network. It's kind of like having a little digital pet, except instead of feeding it, you're feeding your future wallet. The concept was born out of Stanford University, designed to distribute a new form of currency to regular people, not just the early crypto insiders who always seem to get rich first. You download the app, join through an invite, and start earning Pi. Over the years, it's grown into a global community with millions of pioneers mining Pi every single day. But here's the catch: Pi, for now, mostly exists in its own little world. It's what's called a closed mainnet, meaning all the activity and balances are real inside the app, but you can't actually go out and buy a burger or a plane ticket with it yet. It's like being at a party where everyone's having fun, but the doors are still locked from the outside. The Pi team's plan is to build up the community, strengthen the network, and get everything secure before opening it up to the public financial system. Now, the reason everyone's eyeing that November 2025 date comes down to something that sounds incredibly boring: ISO 20022. I know, it sounds like a printer model, but it's actually one of the biggest revolutions happening in global finance right now. Think of ISO 20022 as the universal language banks are learning to speak. Right now, financial systems all over the world talk in different languages. That's why international transfers are so slow, full of errors, and ridiculously expensive. ISO 20022 changes that. It's like giving every bank a translator that instantly makes sense of any transaction data. With this standard, messages are richer, more detailed, and more reliable. Instead of sending a vague money transfer, it can include exactly who's paying, what it's for, and all the regulatory info in one clean package. Central banks, SWIFT, and major commercial banks are already migrating to ISO 20022. It's not a question of if, it's a matter of when. And Pi wants to be ready when that shift becomes the global standard. Announcing ISO compliance is Pi's way of saying, hey, we can play in the same league as the big guys. We speak your language now. That's where the November 22nd, 2025 date comes in. It's the global deadline for many institutions to complete their ISO transitions. By targeting that same milestone, Pi is positioning itself to integrate smoothly into this new, standardized financial ecosystem. It's like training to join an orchestra right before the concert begins: learn the music, show up prepared, and you just might get a seat on the main stage. So, what would that mean for ordinary users? For starters, legitimacy. Once Pi can communicate with traditional banks in the same format they use, it stops being the weird crypto cousin and becomes a potential partner in the system. That means easier movement of funds between Pi and traditional currencies. It could also mean cheaper, faster global transactions. Think about it: today, sending money across borders can take days and cost a small fortune in fees. But with ISO 20022's richer, smarter data, Pi could help enable near-instant payments at a fraction of the cost. Imagine sending money to a friend overseas and it arrives in seconds, not days. There's another perk: richer transaction details mean businesses can keep cleaner books. With automatic invoices, payment IDs, and tax info baked in, Pi could become a practical tool for merchants, not just a speculative asset. That's the kind of utility that builds trust, which in turn boosts adoption and value. But before Pi can reach that level, it needs something critical: exchange listings. Without being traded on major exchanges, Pi stays trapped inside its garden walls. ISO compatibility could lower those barriers by making the currency look more legitimate and technically sound to regulators and exchanges alike. That's the key that could finally unlock the door. Of course, Pi isn't the first project trying to bridge the gap between crypto and the banking world. Ripple and Stellar have been working on similar goals for years: faster, cheaper, global payments using blockchain. Ripple aimed for the banks directly and faced heavy regulatory battles, especially in the United States. Stellar took a more inclusive path, focusing on connecting individuals, financial apps, and institutions. Both made progress, but they also proved that it's a long, expensive road. That's an important lesson for Pi: technology alone isn't enough. Regulation takes time. Trust has to be earned. Even with millions of users, Pi will need to prove its system can handle real-world volume, stay secure, and comply with financial laws in dozens of countries. And let's not ignore the risks. The biggest threat is regulation. Different governments have different stances on crypto, and a ban or restriction in a major market could hit Pi hard. Then there's scalability. Can the network handle millions of transactions per second once it's fully open? Security, too, is critical. A single breach could destroy trust overnight. There's also a psychological hurdle. Many early users treat Pi like treasure, something to hoard rather than spend. But for any currency to succeed, it has to circulate. It has to be used. That shift, from collecting Pi to actually using Pi, might be one of the hardest transitions of all. So, what are the odds that you'll be buying groceries or paying rent with Pi anytime soon? Well, Pi's strengths are undeniable: an enormous global user base, a focused goal of ISO integration, and a clear, public deadline. On the flip side, it still has to prove its technical reliability, earn regulatory trust, secure exchange listings, and stabilize its value. In other words, Pi Network has a ticket to the future of digital finance, but it still has to board the train. November 22, 2025 isn't the finish line, it's the starting pistol. From that point forward, the real test begins. Success will depend on the millions of pioneers who keep building, the developers who create useful apps, and the institutions willing to give Pi a chance. So, keep an eye on official updates, not just the hype. Keep tapping if you enjoy being part of the experiment. But maybe, don't quit your day job just yet, because the next chapter of Pi is still being written.